Hey guys, welcome back. My name is Hamaji and today we're going to be taking a look at the Tealios V2 switches. These switches have a pretty interesting reputation within the community. Some people consider it to be absolutely overpriced for the offers, and some people consider it to be a genuinely viable endgame switch and totally worth the price. And for a steep price of $1 per switch, it makes total sense as to why these switches have gained such notoriety. So the Tealios switches come from the linear section of ZealPC's line of switches, and you may know ZealPC for their other switches like the Zelios, Sakurios, Roselios, and the Helios. Version 1 was initially released on the 1st of August 2017, and the V2s came around the end of 2018. So it's been a good 2 years and more since the last major upgrade of the Tealios switches. Which begs the question, are they still worth the $1 price tag? Let's take a look. The Tealios V2s are manufactured by Gateron and are sold under ZealPC. It has a transparent switch housing with a teal stem and a gold-plated spring, and honestly, it looks really pretty. It's probably one of my favorite looking switches on the market. The top and bottom housing are both made of polycarbonate, and the stem itself is made of polyoxymethylene, which is the standard low friction plastic used for pretty much every switch stem. The switches come in a 5-pin configuration, which makes it PCB mounted out of the box, but can be clipped to become a plate mounted switch if you're working with a 3-pin PCB. These switches do not come factory lubed, but out of the box are pretty smooth and has fairly minimal scratchiness. The Tealios switches have a standard travel distance of 4mm and a bottom-up force of 67 grams, which puts it in a sort of mid to high range of most of the linear switches. For comparison, it's 5 grams heavier than the alpacas, 3.5 grams heavier than the Gateron yellows, and 3 grams lighter than the novelty creams and black inks. I'm never a huge fan of switches that are too light, as they can cause misinputs and are generally just not as satisfying to use as switches that are slightly heavier. But at the same time, I don't really like switches that are too heavy either, as it passes the threshold of being nice and satisfying to use, and it just becomes a little bit exhausting to use over long periods of time. The Tealios switches for me strike a very nice balance of having some weight to it, so it is very satisfying to use and it doesn't cause any misinputs, but at the same time, it's not too heavy where I can't use it every day. So 67 grams, very nice sweet spot. So in terms of switch wobble, the Tealios switches have a fairly noticeable amount of wobble. It's not to the point where it hinders the typing experience at all, but it still surprised me, especially when you again consider the price tag. I tried comparing it to some other switches like the Gateron Black Inks, the Banana Splits, the Lilacs, Gateron Yellows, Creams, and Tangerines, and the Tealios switches didn't majorly outperform any of the switches, and in fact, sometimes had slightly more wobble than the cheaper linears. So even with the large price gap, it's not any better than any of the other switches around the $0.65 price range. It's still good, just not good enough to the point where it can justify the large price gap. Regardless, I've never experienced any issues with switch wobble when typing or when working with it, so it's still a good switch to work with. Filming the switch does reduce the amount of switch wobble to the point where it's basically gone, so it's definitely something I would recommend if you are going to be using these. In terms of the sound and feel, the Tealios V2s are very well known for their higher pitched sound signature compared to other linears on the market. In general, switches with transparent housings will generally have a higher pitched sound signature compared to linears with opaque housings. So the switches completely stock without any lube or film really isn't anything special. It produces this harsh high pitched sound and also has a bit of spring ping. In terms of the overall feel, it is still really smooth and definitely achieves that premium smoothness and feel. There is no scratchiness or roughness, it just sounds really unrefined. Compared to much cheaper switches like Gateron Yellows or Novelty Creams, it is miles ahead. But when you start comparing it to other switches like the Duroc L series or the Banana Splits, Tangerines, or Gateron Black Inks, the difference starts to become very minimal, especially when used stock. However, after lubing and filming the switches, it is a completely different experience. Lubed Tealios V2s become really smooth and I really like them. They turn into this absolutely buttery smooth switch, and the unsatisfying sharp high-pitched sound signature and spring ping I was referring to earlier goes away completely. The pitch of the switch also goes down by a considerable amount, and it starts to create the satisfying pop sound whenever you bottom out and return on the switch. The Tealios switches are definitely not made for the stock experience, and it is made very clear, especially when you compare the difference between a stock Tealios and a modded Tealios. The typing experience on a modded Tealios V2 is great and it feels extremely premium. The switches feel like absolute butter, and when pressed down it travels smoothly. I don't feel any friction when pressing down at all, and bottoming out is also really gentle and satisfying. And before we move on to the sound test, I want to quickly thank Ice Keys for sending over their hand-lubed Tealios switches. As a keyboard content creator, I have to spend a lot of time building different boards and testing out different switches, so being able to get really high quality and consistently hand-lubed switches is a huge time saver. If you guys want to get your own hand-lubed switches, go to icekeys.com and use code Hamaji and you'll get 10% off on all of the switches. You're welcome. And of course, the sound test. Okay, so are the Tealios switches worth the price? In my opinion, not really. Now, undeniably, the Tealios switches are still really good on their own. You know, they sound great, they're really smooth, they're built really well, and overall, they're just very high quality. That is undeniable. But when you start comparing it to some other slightly cheaper switches on the market, that price of $1 per switch starts to make a lot less sense. So to give you guys a better understanding, I built the same Brutal 60 keyboard with the same configuration and same keycaps with Durock L series linear switches. And this is how it sounds. I was absolutely shocked at how similar they both sounded, especially when you consider the price difference. And in terms of the overall typing experience and feel, it was just as smooth as the Tealios switches. It also has the same spring weight, but it's just a lot cheaper. The only tiny difference I could tell is that the Durock L series sounded a little bit deeper, which I actually prefer. So honestly, I would only recommend buying the Tealios switches if you have a very specific aesthetic you want to accomplish, or if you really like the very specific sound signature of the Tealios switches, or if you just want to test them out. You should definitely do your research on some of the other linear switches available, but some of my recommendations will be the Durock L series linear switches, which provide a very similar sound and feel. The Tangerines are also an amazing choice. They come in both 63 gram and 67 gram springs, and they're very well known for their high-pitched sound signature, or clack as some people might call it. And they also come factory lube, so if you're looking for a stock experience, that is a really good choice. And of course, you have the Gateron black inks, which are slightly heavier and have a slightly deeper sound signature, but are super smooth. They're also my personal favorite switch. And of course, if you're on a tight budget, I can always recommend the Gateron yellows. Amazing performance, especially for the price. All right, so overall, Tealios switches, a really good product, but really overpriced. Make sure you do your research, because you should only buy the Tealios switches if it is exactly what you're looking for. Let me know what you guys think about the Tealios V2s. If you used them before, are they worth the price or are they completely overpriced? And if there's any other switch you guys want me to review or test out, please let me know down in the comments below. As always, thank you for watching. If you guys want to join my Discord server, it's discord.gg/Hamaji, and I also have a Twitter @Hamaji. And with that, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.